Today I wanted to talk a little bit about cloud. We get asked this a lot. We have a lot of businesses that don't understand why or what or if they should do cloud. And it's not always the right answer for everybody. So first and foremost, you got to decide if it is yours, if it is for you. Today I'm going to talk about a few topics. First, what is cloud? 2, how can I use it? 3, should I use it? And if we have some time, I'd like to get into a little bit on what is the difference between a public and a private cloud. We hear that a lot. I just kind of want to go over the basics of that. And it can make a big difference on whether or not you use cloud for your business. So first of all, what is cloud? At the very basics of this, cloud is essentially you renting server processing power from somebody else. Back in the good old days of the 2000s, we didn't have cloud. The internet wasn't fast enough. The providers didn't have the server horsepower. Servers were expensive. So most people had to buy the servers and put them on premise themselves and figure out how and what to do with that device. And or buy it because they needed something. They had an application they had to run on it for their business, or to that extent, a SQL database, an email server, etc. Today, all these hosts can be hosted in the cloud, and part of the reason that there is because internet traffic has become cheap, it's affordable, and it's fast. The other piece is server data storage is become exponentially cheaper than it was in the past. So going forward, you're going to see a lot more use. Cloud will continue to get cheaper and become more and more affordable. But effectively, it is using someone else's server. There are 2 different types of cloud, though. There is the cloud application, which most of everybody is pretty familiar with. Used it whether or not you know it or not. Office 365 is a prime example of a cloud application. Salesforce. Actually, when you get right down to it, we've all been using some form of cloud application for a very long time with email. Hotmail, if you remember that email address, AOL, Gmail, they're all cloud applications. You're using someone else's server to host and use your email. The other piece of it is cloud servers. This is a little bit more difficult to wrap your head around. This is actually the server that's sitting in your office traditionally today, sitting in someone else's data center, and you have to figure out how to access it. That was a little more tough. We'll get into that in a second here. But when you get to the second question that I asked was, how can I use it in my business? Once again, it's easier to understand if you start talking about cloud apps, because a lot of us have utilized cloud apps in the past and understand, for example, Office 365 and email is very easy to understand. Well, I apologize if I'm assuming, but a lot of people have utilized Office 365 or Microsoft 365 as it's called now, and understand that going forward, that's where your email is stored. It's a hosted solution where they maintain the servers, they guarantee the uptime, you are responsible for the data. And that's pretty much every cloud application, Salesforce, Microsoft 365, Gmail, everything like that. It's your data, it's just sitting on their system. And a good reputable company will have security and they will have encryption and everything else on that. So they cannot access your data. When it comes to the servers, that is where people start trying to figure out how they wrap their head around it. A lot of people still utilize their servers today for file and print sharing. You have your network drive, your S drive, your P drive, whatever the case may be. Everybody's got a little different drive, right? That's where you save your Word and Excel files. And we face it, no matter what we do, a lot of business is done utilizing Word and Excel files. So we got to continue to manage that. So now, instead of going out and buying a brand new server or 2 or 3, because let's face it, if you have a file server, you need a domain controller. And if you have a domain controller, you probably need a backup domain controller. If you have a file server and a backup domain controller and a domain controller, do you have an application server that is running a core business application? Widget 123. I don't know. Everybody's got a different one, right? And I apologize. I just said right, and I read an article recently about how we should stop saying that. So I'm going to concentrate on that a little bit too. However, using your server, now what happens? Okay, so if I have a server, now I have to rent a server from somebody. Let's use Azure, for example, which is Microsoft's cloud. If you use Azure, you're using their server. Now you don't have to buy one. And if you don't have to buy 1, 2, 3, 4 servers, you're potentially saving yourself tens of thousands of dollars in capital expenses. And you will be renting them, and that'll be an operational expense. So cash back and forth may or may not be a wash depending on the size. However, it is an operational expense, okay? You will take that server, you'll create it in the cloud, and you will connect it through a VPN tunnel using your internet to get to it from your office. So your end users will not see any difference. A couple of things to think about is one, maintaining your current firewall. Make sure you have a decent and a good firewall. And two, make sure you have a good and reliable internet connection. If you migrate to this solution and have a large business with multiple servers and have a requirement for uptime, you may want to look into redundant internet connections for your office as well. Going forward, though, that is effectively how you would use a cloud server. You would create a VPN tunnel, and your users would see their P drive just like they see their P drive today. Now, let's get into a little question is that we always get asked is why? So I have 4 reasons why I think you should use cloud. A cloud server, for example. The first and foremost is scalability. As you're growing your company and your vendor that you're using for your ERP software or your business line of application software or your core software says, hey, here's the latest upgrade. You just have gone from, level 1 to level 2 because you're a bigger company. And now you need to add 3 more servers. Click, 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 3 servers, you're up and running, and you don't have to wait 6 weeks for the server to arrive, 6 weeks for your IT engineer to build it up, and 6 weeks for all the users to get acclimated to it. It is up and running in potentially days, depending on the type of software. This leads to the second piece that I always look at is called instant upgrades. Now, reason I'm taking these in 2 different things is because scalability means adding servers, adding as your business grows, both up and down too. By the way, scalability, you can scale backwards in case you have a need to reduce your server count. Instant upgrades says that, hey, my file server is running slow or my SQL server is running slow. In the traditional way of using SQL servers or file servers, you call it your server's running slow, your IT guy comes in, he takes a look at it, she takes a look at it, they do some tweaks, they upgrade the operating system, and it's still slow. Okay, now they have to start bolting on new hardware. They have to upgrade the RAM. They have to possibly buy new hard drives. And depending on the age of the physical server, they might tell you to buy a new server. In the virtual world, your SQL server is running slow because you were a company of X size and now you're a company of Z size and you need more horsepower. 3 clicks and you have upgraded all of those things to an upgraded server and you didn't actually come offline. You didn't have to wait for the hardware to be procured. You didn't have to wait 6 weeks. You didn't have to deal with a slowness. Yes, there's an upgraded monthly expense, but it is done. And if you're working correctly, and I'm not trying to sell anything negative, but productivity is king. If your users are being more productive, that extra cost should be absorbed in the extra revenue that you're making from the productivity. So that's where your ROI comes in. The third piece of this puzzle that I really like is the fact that there is no capital expense. You have all operational expense. There might be a startup fee that you might have to pay to your consultant to get the ball rolling. How you choose to have a consulting fee, if you claim that as a capital expense or not, that's up to you. But every month, it's just another operational expense. And by the way, it's an operational expense that as things go down, you can scale backwards. If they go up, they scale up. So once again, back to that scalability. And the last piece that I really, really love about cloud, and COVID has more than put an exclamation point on this, is disaster recovery of remote accessibility. So what does that mean for you? It means if your building cannot be accessed for whatever reason, fire, water, snow, flood, COVID, your employees can still work. Your data is still safe. So you have the ability to be productive even when, at least at your computer systems, off your manufacturing facility, might be a different conversation. But if you are a service-based company, it's all right there. Never changes. How you worked yesterday at the office is the exact same how you work today at home. Just that when you're at home, you have to actually connect your VPN. At the office, it's automatically connected for you. That's basically the why, the how, and the what of cloud computing for a business owner. I would be remiss though and I've told you we're going to talk a ton about security today, but we have to talk about security a little bit. With cloud security, with cloud services, your files are more secure than they are at the office. You can have the latest server that is tracking who's downloading what and where it's going. You can force them to not download files. You can do that on your servers right now, but it's a little more difficult. You can enforce VPN access so that if your users are at a Starbucks, they can't access the data without a VPN, which is secure. We've talked about VPNs before, highly recommend them. So, sorry, I told you we would talk a ton about security, but there is a security layer to a cloud server that you don't necessarily have at your office. When it really boils down to it though, my biggest reasons for having a cloud server are the remote access, disaster recovery. They're kind of interchangeable. Remote access is productivity. Disaster recovery is your building isn't available. They end up in the same principle. You go work from home, right? The next biggest reason is the scalability, is the growth, the ability for you to grow. So I did say we talk a little bit. I got a couple more minutes that I want to talk with you guys about what the difference between a public and a private cloud is. So the easiest way to look at it is a public cloud is somewhere that is you're sharing a physical location with multiple people. So Azure, AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, are prime examples of public cloud. Private cloud is when you contract with a data center and they give you your own physical server. Now, to you, the end user's experience is no different. Public or private, there's no difference. The only difference between you is the security level. Do you feel more secure contracting with data center XYZ versus Amazon or Microsoft? There's no right answer, and you should consult your IT consultant to decide what's best for you and your company. That's basically the difference. A lot of reasons, especially if you're in like a regulated industry where you have a high security posture or your data is really needed to be secure, you might need to be a private cloud to maintain that security. A lot of banks utilize private cloud services for their core applications. Very secure, very robust, and there is no ability for leak over or something like that from like a non-vendor. That, in a nutshell, is the how, the what, the why of cloud computing for your business. If you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot us over a comment on BKS-Systems on all the social media. We're live on Facebook right now. This podcast will be going up on LinkedIn this afternoon or tomorrow. We'll be on YouTube, and in the next couple of weeks, we're hoping to start actually getting our podcasts. Well, it might take a couple of weeks, but we're going to actually start getting our podcasts into the Apple podcast sphere, and hopefully you'll be able to start picking us up on your favorite podcast app, Spotify, iTunes, whatever. It's going to take us a couple of weeks, but keep an eye out for it. It's coming. Next week, if you guys have any topics you want to talk about, give us a shout. Love to discuss, whatever's on your mind. Drop us a comment in like I said, in any of our comment sections below. BKS-systems. Give us a high five. Give us a thumbs up at any of our social medias, and we look forward to talking all with you soon.